Valve has just released a new SteamOS update, Linux quietly hits another all-time high on the Steam charts, and Lenovo is finally shipping a proper SteamOS handheld, and Steam posted its biggest revenue month ever. We've got a lot of news to cover this week, so let's get into it. So Valve just pushed SteamOS 3.7.19 to everyone, and this is one of those updates that doesn't really add anything new, but instead it fixes stuff that shouldn't have been broken in the first place. Game recording clips randomly stopping mid-recording is fixed. That one didn't affect everyone, but if you have used it before, you definitely notice it. It has been on the Reddit branch for a while, and from my personal experience, it really is fixed this time around. There was a performance overlay bug showing 0 CPU power draw. This has been fixed too, and I think this is an issue which honestly matters more than it sounds. If you're tuning TDP or you're using the Power Tools plugin, for example, and trying to get consistent battery life, trying to undervolt the Steam Deck, this bad data makes that basically impossible. So it's nice to see that this has been fixed and now you can rely on the statistics a lot more. They also fixed audio not always switching properly when plugging in 3.5mm headphones. Now I've had this issue in the past, but I haven't really used wired headphones in a while, and I did some testing again and it seems to be fixed. I didn't run into any problems. It properly switched every time I plugged it and unplugged it, so this should be definitely fixed. Now this SteamOS update also fixes overlay elements causing random frame time dips and issues with the frame limiter and VRR acting weird. I personally never had any issues with that. I constantly use the frame limiter, but it seems that's now been fixed. And if you had a Forza Horizon 4 or 5 opening to a blank screen, that has now been addressed too and has been fixed. So this is classic SteamOS stuff. Some of these have been fixed before, and that's why this is mostly a regression update. You're trying to make it work again, but it's not exciting, but it's the kind of maintenance that keeps the deck feeling reliable instead of janky. And as always, I recommend you wait a couple of days before updating if you're using any decky plugins, as those tend to break when SteamOS is updated. Now moving to some exciting news, Linux hits another all-time high on Steam. In the December 2025 Steam hardware survey, we can see Linux has now pushed to 3.58%, which is its highest point yet. Now Windows still dominates at 94.23% and macOS sits at 2.18%, but the Linux number is the one worth paying attention to, not because it's huge, but because it keeps going up. Now when you dig into the distro breakdown, SteamOS is still on top with over 26%, followed by Arch and Linux Mint, and a growing number of gaming-focused distros like Bazzite and CachyOS. But I think the stat that matters is that Steam Deck users now make up more than a quarter of all Linux users on Steam, and I think this breakdown of all Linux distros matters a lot, because the takeaway I'm able to make from this is that SteamOS isn't just taking over, it's that Linux gaming on Steam is becoming more diverse. So SteamOS is the biggest single distro because the Steam Deck made Linux accessible. However, desktop Linux users are still the majority, and Proton is the glue that's holding all of this together. It's slow progress, but it's real progress, and Linux gaming is here to stay. It's happening without Valve having to force anything, and I just can't wait to see what the numbers look like when the Steam machine releases as well. And while we're on the topic of Linux distros, Lenovo officially announced a SteamOS version of the Legion Go 2 at CES 2026. And honestly, this feels less like a surprise and more like something that was always going to happen. It will have the same hardware as the Windows model, so Ryzen Z2 Extreme, up to 32 gigs of RAM, up to 2 terabytes of SSD, and that big 8.8-inch OLED screen. It's coming all the way in June 2026, and it's starting at $1,200, which is pretty expensive, and it's weird that the SteamOS version costs $100 more than the Windows one, so it's either gonna be the same price or less expensive. I'm not really sure. Maybe the SteamOS version will only come with 16 gigabytes of RAM. The one downside that might actually matter is biometric login. So SteamOS still doesn't support fingerprint readers, and that feature is basically gone on this device. Lenovo previously shipped the Legion Go OS, one of their less powerful handhelds, with SteamOS, and it seems that has worked out well for them if they plan to do it with their flagship device this year. Now this is a major player shipping a premium handheld with SteamOS out of the box. This is not a mod, not a community workaround, not a niche product. That's Lenovo saying that this is a valid supported platform, and I think this is fantastic news for everyone in the handheld gaming space. Moving over back to Valve, Steam has had its biggest month ever in terms of revenue. According to Alinea Analytics, Steam generated 1.6 billion in gross revenue in December 2025. It's the biggest month the platform has ever had, and that's up 22.7% year over year, and it even beats the pandemic spike from 2020. Over 100 million players contributed to that total. Now keep in mind this figure includes in-game purchases as well, and that's why Counter-Strike 2 actually topped revenue. Arc Raiders sold over 1 million copies in just a couple of weeks, and big winter sale discounts pushed massive numbers for a lot of games. I personally spent a lot more than I'd like to admit, and it's just pretty great that Steam is growing at this scale. And finally, let's talk about some actual games. The Humble Choice for January is out, and this is one of the better months we've had in a while. It has some great titles such as Sonic Frontiers, Tomb Raider 4-6 Remastered, Etrian Odyssey 2 HD, and those alone make it a pretty solid for Steam Deck users. All of these games are verified on Steam Deck and they run great. Then you've got stuff like Metal Slug Tactics and Wizard of Legend 2, which are still great on Steam Deck, even if they're only marked as playable. Now for $15, this is one of those months where you probably won't regret staying subscribed, even if you don't love every single game, but it's still a pretty good humble bundle. That's all I have for you today, guys. Let me know what you think, especially about the Legion Go 2, the pricing around it, the SteamOS becoming more common outside the Steam Deck. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like, subscribe for more Steam and Steam Deck content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.